There are moments in time that look ordinary on the surface, dates that pass like any other, hours that feel no different than the ones before them. But then there are moments, pointed moments, where heaven leans closer than usual, where the unseen realm begins to whisper louder than the noise of the world. And July 13th is one of those moments. You didn't find this message by accident. You didn't just click here. Something in you paused. Something in you felt pulled. Something in you, deep, quiet, undeniable, said, "Wait, this is for me." And that feeling, that is not coincidence. That is alignment. Because Archangel Michael stands in this moment, not as a distant figure, not as a symbol, but as a voice cutting through the confusion that has surrounded your identity for far too long. His presence is not gentle today. It is precise. It is urgent. It is intentional. And his message is clear. You have been misunderstanding yourself. Yes, you. Not just a little. Not just occasionally. But deeply. For years, you have wrestled with something inside you that never seemed to fit the version of yourself you thought you were supposed to be. A side of you that reacts differently. A side that feels too intense, too guarded, too distant, too emotional, or sometimes too cold. You've questioned it, haven't you? You've asked yourself, why am I like this? You've wondered, why can't I just be consistent? You've even felt guilt, thinking, maybe something is wrong with me, but what if I told you that part of you you've been trying to fix was never broken? What if the side you hide, the one you don't show people, the one you even try to hide from yourself, was actually the very thing that protected you when no one else did? Pause for a moment. Think about the times you pulled away from people not because you didn't care, but because something in you said, "This isn't safe." Think about the moments you became quiet, distant, or guarded, not because you were weak, but because something in you was shielding your spirit. Think about the times you felt like two different versions of yourself, one soft, one strong, one open, one closed, one light, one shadow. You thought that was confusion. But Archangel Michael says that was protection. And now, on July 13th, something shifts. Because heaven is revealing a truth you were never taught. You were never meant to be only one version of yourself. You were never designed to exist in a single dimension of personality, emotion, or expression. The world told you to pick a side, to be either strong or sensitive, either kind or firm, either forgiving or guarded. But heaven never asked that of you. Heaven created you with layers. And the part you've been hiding is one of the most sacred layers of all. That's why this message feels different. It's why your chest feels tighter, your thoughts feel louder, your spirit feels like it's leaning in right now. Because something in you recognizes this truth before your mind fully understands it. You've been living in a quiet tension, haven't you? Trying to present the acceptable version of yourself to the world while keeping the other side locked away. Smiling when you feel like withdrawing. Trusting when your instincts say wait. Silencing parts of yourself just to maintain peace with others. And slowly, without realizing it, you began to see your hidden side as the problem. But what if that hidden side was the reason you're still standing today? What if it was the reason you didn't break in moments that should have shattered you? What if it was the reason you walked away when staying would have destroyed you? What if it was the reason your light, your true light, survived everything it went through? Archangel Michael steps closer in this moment and says, "You have judged what heaven assigned to protect you." Let that sink in. Because this isn't just a message. This is a turning point. A moment where everything you thought you understood about yourself begins to shift. The confusion you've carried, the internal conflict you've tried to silence, a quiet battle between who you are and who you think you should be, it all starts to make sense from here. But you must stay with this. You must not turn away now. Because what's about to be revealed next will change how you see every version of yourself you've ever questioned. And once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. Type "I am ready to see my true self" in the comments if you feel this message reaching you. Blessing code 1717 is now activated around your spirit. There is a version of you that you rarely let anyone see. Not because it doesn't exist, but because somewhere along your journey, you were taught, directly or silently, that this side of you was too much, too different, or simply unacceptable. And so, without even realizing it, you began to hide it. You began to edit yourself. You began to present a version of you that felt easier for the world to receive, while quietly pushing the other side into the shadows. But let me ask you something. When did you first decide that part of you was wrong? Was it when someone told you that you were too sensitive, too emotional, too distant, too intense? Was it when your reactions didn't match what others expected from you? Or when your instincts warned you about people, but you ignored them just to avoid conflict? Think about it. Because that moment, that subtle shift, is where the division inside you began. Archangel Michael speaks into this space now with clarity that cuts through every layer of confusion you've carried. He says, the part you were taught to reject was never your enemy. It was your response to what others could not understand. And suddenly things begin to make sense. That guarded version of you, the one that pulls back when something feels off, that wasn't distance, it was discernment. That intense version of you, the one that feels deeply and reacts strongly, that wasn't instability, it was sensitivity to truth. That quiet version of you, the one that withdraws instead of explaining, that wasn't weakness, it was protection of your peace. But instead of being taught how to understand these parts of yourself, you were taught to suppress them, to smooth them out, to make them more acceptable. And over time, you started believing that the only version of you worth showing was the one that caused the least friction. So you adapted. You became easier to handle, easier to like, easier to accept. But in doing so, you also became disconnected from a powerful part of your own identity. You began to live with an internal contradiction. One side of you wanting to be real, raw, and honest, while the other side tried to maintain control, composure, and approval. And this tension didn't just exist occasionally. It became a pattern, a silent battle you carried every day. You felt it in conversations where you held back your truth. You felt it in relationships where you ignored your instincts. You felt it in moments where you smiled even though something inside you felt unsettled. And slowly, without realizing it, you started to see your hidden side as something to fix instead of something to understand. But Archangel Michael interrupts that belief right now. He speaks with authority and says, you were never meant to erase that part of yourself. You were meant to learn its language. Because what you've been calling your flaws were actually signals. Signals that something wasn't aligned. Signals that something didn't feel right. Signals that your spirit was trying to protect something sacred within you. But instead of listening, you silenced them. And here's the truth that may shake you a little. The more you rejected that hidden side, the louder it had to become. That's why it showed up in ways you couldn't ignore. That's why it surfaced in moments you didn't expect. That's why it created reactions that even you struggled to explain. Because it was never trying to sabotage you. It was trying to be heard. Think about the times you suddenly pulled away from someone without being able to fully explain why. Think about the moments you felt uneasy in situations that looked perfectly fine on the outside. Think about the times your energy shifted before your mind could catch up. You labeled those moments as overthinking, and mood swings as inconsistency, But what if they were actually clarity arriving before logic? What if your hidden side wasn't confused but aware? Archangel Michael reveals something deeper here. He says, the world rewarded the version of you that was easy to understand, but heaven protected the version of you that could see beyond appearances. And that hidden side of you, the one you've been questioning, is the one that sees. It sees what isn't said. It feels what isn't shown. It senses what others overlook. But because it doesn't always operate in ways that make immediate sense, you learn to doubt it. You learn to override it. You learn to trust external validation more than internal truth. And that is where the disconnect began. But now something is shifting. Because you are being called not to choose between these two sides, but to understand them. To stop labeling one as good and the other as bad. To stop trying to eliminate what doesn't fit a perfect image. To stop apologizing for the parts of you that were designed to protect you. This is where your awareness deepens. This is where you begin to see that your hidden side was never the problem. It was the part of you that stayed alert when everything else tried to stay comfortable. And the more you begin to acknowledge it, the more it will begin to make sense. Because what's coming next will reveal why this hidden side didn't just exist, it intervened. Type "I accept all sides of me" in the comments if this truth resonates with your spirit. Blessing code 2828 is now surrounding your awareness. There is something you were never told, something that changes everything once you truly understand it. The part of you that you have labeled as too much, too guarded, or too complicated did not appear by accident. It was not randomly formed. It was not a flaw that developed over time. It was a response, yes, but not just to pain. It was a response guided by something deeper, something intentional, something protective. And Archangel Michael steps forward now to reveal a truth that may shift the way you see your entire life. He says, what you call your shadow, heaven assigned as your shield. Pause and let that settle, because this changes the narrative completely. A version of you that became more cautious, more observant, more selective did not emerge to limit you. It emerged to guard something within you that was too valuable to be exposed without protection. Your light, your genuine kindness, your openness, your ability to love deeply, your willingness to trust, was never weak. It was powerful. But power without protection becomes vulnerable. And somewhere along your journey, your spirit recognized that not everyone who had access to you deserved access to that light. So something activated within you, not to replace your light but to stand in front of it. Think about the times when you felt yourself pull back from people, even when part of you wanted to stay open. Think about the moments when you became more reserved, more careful with your words, more aware of your surroundings. You thought you were becoming distant. You thought you were losing your ability to be the old you. But what was actually happening was that your shadow was stepping forward, quietly taking position as a guardian. Archangel Michael says, you were not closing your heart. You were learning where not to leave it unguarded. And suddenly, those moments you once questioned begin to take on a different meaning. That instinct to withdraw was not rejection, it was discernment. That hesitation you felt was not fear, it was awareness. That shift in your energy around certain people was not inconsistency, it was protection. Because your shadow was watching. It was noticing what your light was too trusting to question. It was sensing what your kindness was too willing to overlook. It was identifying patterns, intentions, and energies that did not align with your spirit. And instead of allowing you to be exposed to harm, it stepped in quietly, firmly, without explanation. But because no one taught you how to understand this process, you began to misinterpret it. You began to see your shadow as something that disrupted your peace, rather than something that preserved it. You thought it was the reason for your inner conflict, when in reality, it was the reason you didn't lose yourself completely in situations that could have consumed you. Let me ask you something that may shift your perspective even more. Think back to a moment where you felt something was off about a person or situation, but you ignored it. You pushed it aside because you didn't want to seem judgmental. You stayed open, stayed kind, stayed present even when something inside you was quietly warning you. What happened next? Did that situation bring you peace, or did it eventually confirm what you initially felt? The voice you ignored, that feeling you dismissed, that was your shadow speaking. That was your protection trying to reach you before the damage could be done. But because you were taught to prioritize being understood over being aware, you silenced it. And yet even when you didn't listen, your shadow never stopped working. It adapted. It found other ways to protect you. Sometimes through distance. Sometimes through discomfort. Sometimes through reactions you didn't fully understand in the moment. But every time its purpose remained the same: to keep your light intact. Archangel Michael reveals something even deeper here. He says, your shadow carried the weight your light was never meant to bear. Your light was meant to love, to give, to connect, to create. It was never meant to constantly defend itself against manipulation, dishonesty, or hidden intentions. So your shadow took on that responsibility. It absorbed the tension. It held the boundaries. It stood alert when your light needed to remain open and expressive. And this is why you felt divided. Because one part of you wanted to remain soft, trusting, and open, while the other part remained watchful, guarded, and selective. And instead of seeing this as a divine balance, you experienced it as internal conflict. But it was never conflict. It was coordination. A sacred system within you designed to ensure that your light could continue to exist without being extinguished by the wrong environments, the wrong people, or the wrong timing. Now, on July 13th, that understanding begins to surface. Because you are no longer being asked to suppress your shadow. You are being asked to recognize it, to acknowledge its role, to see it not as something separate from you, but as something that has been working for you all along. And when you begin to see it this way, something shifts inside you. The confusion starts to dissolve. The self-judgment begins to fade. And in its place, clarity begins to rise. Because what's coming next will reveal how everything you've experienced, every moment of doubt, every shift in your behavior, every internal battle, was leading you to this exact realization. You were never divided. You were protected. Type "I honor my shadow" in the comments if this truth speaks to your spirit. Blessing code 3939 is now activating deeper understanding within you. As this revelation settles into your spirit, understand this: every truth you receive is not just for you. It is a seed meant to reach others who are still walking in confusion. When you choose to support this message through Super Thanks or through the PayPal link in the description, you are not simply giving. You are planting light into someone else's darkness. Scripture declares, "Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days." And today, that promise is alive for you. I feel led to say this clearly. I am stepping into obedience in this moment, and my seed will carry this message further than my voice ever could. The same way your shadow protected your light, your giving now will protect and release light into lives you may never see, but heaven will record it. This is not a transaction. It is a divine act that opens spiritual doors and aligns you with greater flow. Act now, because delayed obedience delays impact. Release your seed and watch how heaven multiplies it back into your life with purpose and power. There is a truth about your life that you have felt but perhaps never fully understood. The pain you experienced was never random. The moments that broke you, confused you, isolated you, and forced you to confront parts of yourself you didn't recognize were not meaningless interruptions in your journey. They were shaping forces. They were assignments. And Archangel Michael steps into this moment with a voice that carries both authority and clarity as he says, "What you endured did not weaken you. It refined what was already strong within you. But the problem is you didn't always see it that way. When the pain came, it didn't feel like refinement. It felt like loss. It felt like betrayal. It felt like confusion. It felt like being left alone in moments where you needed understanding the most. And because of that, you began to associate those experiences with something being wrong, either with the world around you, or even worse, with yourself. You asked questions that never seemed to have clear answers. Why did this happen to me? Why did people misunderstand me? Why did situations that started with promise end in disappointment? Why did I feel so deeply when others seemed unaffected? And slowly, without realizing it, you began to internalize the idea that your sensitivity, your awareness, your emotional depth were liabilities. But Archangel Michael interrupts that belief now. He says, your pain was not proof of your weakness. It was evidence of your capacity to feel truth beyond surface reality. Because what you experienced most people would not have even noticed. Where others saw normal interactions, you felt subtle shifts. Where others ignored inconsistencies, you sensed misalignment. Where others remained unaffected, you absorbed the emotional weight of what was happening around you. And yes, that sensitivity made the pain feel deeper. It made the experiences more intense. It made the lessons harder to process in the moment. But that same sensitivity also shaped your strength. Because strength is not just the ability to endure. It is the ability to perceive, to adapt, to grow, and to remain aware even after being hurt. And that is exactly what you did, even when you didn't realize it. Think about how you responded after those difficult moments. You didn't become careless. You didn't lose your ability to feel. You didn't completely shut down. Instead, something within you recalibrated. Something became more aware, more intentional, more discerning. That wasn't damage. That was development. Archangel Michael reveals something deeper here. He says, every moment that wounded you also revealed something you needed to see. And if you look back now, you can begin to recognize it. The betrayal showed you who could not be trusted with your openness. The rejection revealed where you were seeking validation that was never meant to define you. The confusion exposed situations where your intuition was trying to guide you, but you hadn't learned to listen yet. Each experience carried a message, but at the time you were too close to the pain to hear it. You were focused on what was happening, not on what was being revealed. You were trying to make sense of the emotions, not realizing that those emotions were signals, pointing you toward a deeper understanding of yourself and the world around you. And this is where your shadow began to strengthen. Because your light continued to feel, to hope, to connect, while your shadow began to observe, to analyze, to protect. The more you experienced, the more your shadow adapted. It learned patterns. It recognized behaviors. It stored lessons that your conscious mind had not yet processed. And over time it became wiser, not colder, not distant, not detached, wiser. But because this wisdom came through pain, you associated it with something negative. You saw the outcomes, the guardedness, the caution, the hesitation, and assumed they were signs of something being wrong. when in reality they were signs of something being built. Let me ask you something that may shift your perspective even further. If you could go back and remove every painful experience from your life, every moment that challenged you, every situation that forced you to grow, would you still be the same person you are today? Would you have the same awareness, the same discernment, the same ability to read situations beyond what is being said? Or would you still be trusting without question, open without boundaries, giving without understanding where your energy was going? The truth is, your strength did not come from comfort. It came from contrast. It came from experiencing what did not align, so you could recognize what does. It came from navigating confusion, so you could develop clarity. It came from being misunderstood, so you could begin to understand yourself more deeply. And now you are standing in a moment where all of that begins to connect. Because what once felt like scattered experiences now reveal a pattern of growth, a pattern of awareness, a pattern of becoming. Archangel Michael says, you were not being broken. You were being prepared to see more clearly, prepared to move more intentionally, prepared to carry both your light and your shadow with understanding instead of resistance. And this is where the shift begins, because what comes next will reveal how this internal development, this balance between what you feel and what you observe, was not just shaping you, it was positioning you. Type "my pain had purpose" in the comments if you feel this truth aligning within you. Lesson code 4545 is now strengthening your clarity. There is something you have felt for a long time, even if you never had the words to describe it. A quiet tension, a subtle pull in two different directions. Moments where one part of you wanted to move forward with openness, trust, and vulnerability, while another part of you stepped in, slowed you down, questioned everything, and held you back. And in those moments, it didn't feel like balance. It felt like conflict. It felt like something inside you had divided. And Archangel Michael steps into this awareness now with a truth that reframes everything. He says, what you thought was internal conflict was actually spiritual refinement in motion. Because what you have been experiencing is not a flaw in your nature. It is not confusion within your identity. It is a process, a sacred, intentional process, where your light and your shadow have been learning how to exist together without overpowering one another. But without understanding this, you interpreted it as a battle you needed to fix. You felt it when you wanted to trust someone, but something in you hesitated. You felt it when you wanted to express yourself fully, but another part of you held back. You felt it when you were trying to stay positive, but something deeper within you kept analyzing what didn't feel right. And because you were taught that peace means consistency, you began to question why you couldn't just be one way. Why couldn't you just be open all the time? Or guarded all the time? Why did it feel like you were constantly adjusting, constantly recalibrating, constantly navigating between two different internal responses? But what you didn't realize is that this was not inconsistency. This was intelligence. Archangel Michael says, your spirit was learning when to open and when to protect. That is not confusion. That is wisdom being formed. Because a one-dimensional version of you would not survive the complexity of the environments you have been placed in. If you were only open, you would be easily taken advantage of. If you were only guarded, you would close yourself off from meaningful connection. So instead of choosing one extreme, your spirit developed both capacities and began the process of teaching you how to use them. But that process did not feel smooth. It felt like resistance. Because your light naturally wants to trust, to connect, to believe in the good. It moves with openness. It extends without hesitation. It sees potential where others might see risk. And this is a beautiful part of you. It is necessary. It is what allows you to experience genuine connection and meaning. But your shadow operates differently. It observes. It questions. It waits. It measures energy, intention, and alignment. And does not rush to trust it. It does not assume everything is as it appears. It is not pessimistic. It is perceptive. And when these two parts of you began to operate at the same time, it created a dynamic that felt unfamiliar. One part saying, "Go forward." Another part saying, "Wait and observe." One part saying, "Be open." Another part saying, "Be careful." And instead of recognizing this as coordination, you experienced it as contradiction. But Archangel Michael reveals something crucial here. He says, if you had only one voice within you, you would lack the depth required to navigate truth. Because truth is not always obvious. It is not always presented clearly. It often exists beneath the surface, hidden within layers of behavior, intention, and circumstance. And the only way to navigate that complexity is through a balance of openness and awareness. Your light allows you to engage with the world. Your shadow allows you to understand it. And without both, you would either be disconnected or exposed. Think about how this has played out in your life. There were moments when your light led you into connection, into relationships, opportunities, and experiences that expanded you. But within those same moments, your shadow was quietly observing, noticing details your light overlooked. It was recognizing inconsistencies. It was sensing shifts in energy. It was identifying patterns that did not align with your deeper sense of truth. And when it tried to communicate that to you, it didn't always come through clearly. It came through feelings, through hesitation, through subtle discomfort that didn't always have a logical explanation. And because it didn't match what your light was experiencing in that moment, you questioned it. You wondered, why am I feeling this way when everything seems fine? You told yourself, maybe I'm overthinking. You tried to override it to stay aligned with the version of reality that felt easier to accept. But the tension didn't go away. Because it wasn't meant to. It was meant to be understood. Archangel Michael says, the tension you feel is not meant to divide you. It is meant to develop discernment within you. And discernment is one of the most powerful abilities you can carry. It allows you to move through life without losing yourself. It allows you to engage without being consumed. It allows you to remain open while also remaining aware. But discernment is not something you are born fully understanding. It is something that is formed through experience, through reflection, through the very tension you have been trying to eliminate. And now, you are beginning to see it differently. You are beginning to recognize that the internal war you felt was never about choosing one side over the other. It was about learning how to listen to both. Because your light speaks through desire, connection, and expression. And your shadow speaks through awareness, protection, and insight. And when you learn how to hear them together, something shifts. A confusion begins to settle. The self-doubt begins to fade. The internal resistance begins to transform into clarity. Because now you are no longer trying to silence one part of yourself to make the other feel right. You are beginning to understand how they work together. And this understanding is what prepares you for what comes next. Because what you are stepping into is not just awareness, it is alignment. Type "I trust my inner balance" in the comments if you feel this truth settling within you. Blessing code 5656 is now aligning your spirit with clarity. Here is a belief you were quietly taught without ever realizing it. A belief that shaped how you see yourself, how you present yourself, and how you judge your own behavior. It is the idea that in order to be good, stable, or acceptable, You must be consistent in one single way. Always calm. Always kind. Always understanding. Always the same. And anything outside of that feels like a flaw. But Archangel Michael steps into this moment with a truth that breaks that illusion completely. He says, you were never created to exist in one dimension. You were created with depth so you could move through complexity without losing yourself. And this is where something begins to shift in your understanding. Because the discomfort you felt when you couldn't stay in one emotional or behavioral state was not because something was wrong with you. It was because something within you refused to become limited. You were not designed to respond to every situation the same way. You were not meant to interact with every person using the same level of openness. You were not meant to ignore your internal signals just to maintain an image of consistency. Yet, that is exactly what you tried to do. You tried to smooth out your reactions. You tried to make yourself predictable. You tried to remain in a version of yourself that felt easier for others to understand. But every time you did that, something inside you resisted. Because your spirit knew something your mind had not yet realized. It knew that life is not one-dimensional. People change. Environments shift. And in order to move through all of that with awareness, you must also be able to shift. Not in a way that loses your identity, but in a way that adapts your response. And that is what you have been doing all along. You just didn't recognize it as strength. You saw it as inconsistency. But Archangel Michael reveals the truth. He says, what you called inconsistency was actually your ability to respond with precision. Think about that. Because there were moments when you needed to be open, and you were. You connected. You expressed. You allowed your light to be seen. But there were also moments when something in you knew that openness would not be respected, and you shifted. You became more reserved, more observant, more selective. That was not confusion. That was awareness. But because you were trying to maintain a single version of yourself, those shifts felt uncomfortable. They felt like you were changing too much, or not being yourself. When in reality you were being more of yourself than ever before. Because your true self is not limited to one expression. Your true self is layered. It is capable of softness and strength. It is capable of trust and discernment. It is capable of openness and protection. And the reason you struggled to accept this is because the world often rewards simplicity. It rewards people who are easy to define, easy to categorize, easy to predict. But you were never meant to be easily defined. You were meant to perceive. You were meant to adjust. You were meant to move through situations with a level of awareness that requires more than one way of being. And this is why you felt misunderstood. Because people tried to interpret you based on a single moment, a single reaction, a single version of you without realizing that you operate on multiple levels at once. They saw your openness and assumed that was all you were. Then they saw your boundaries and thought you had changed. But you hadn't changed. They just hadn't seen all of you. And for a long time neither had you. You saw your different sides as separate, as disconnected, as something you needed to control instead of understand. But Archangel Michael is revealing now that these sides are not separate at all. They are integrated. They are part of a system within you that allows you to move through life with both awareness and authenticity. He says, a one-dimensional spirit cannot navigate a multidimensional world. And that is exactly what you have been trying to do. You were trying to simplify yourself to fit into environments that required complexity. You were trying to remain the same in situations that required different responses. And every time you forced yourself into that limitation, you felt that tension. Because your spirit refused to shrink. It refused to ignore what it could see. It refused to silence what it could feel. It refused to remain static when everything around you required movement. And now you are beginning to understand why. Because you were never meant to be predictable. You were meant to be aware. And awareness requires flexibility. It requires the ability to shift without losing your center, to respond without abandoning your truth, to adjust without compromising your identity. And this is where your light and your shadow begin to work together more clearly. Your light brings connection, expression, and presence. Your shadow brings awareness, boundaries, and protection. And when you stop trying to choose between them and instead allow them to function together, something powerful happens. You stop questioning yourself. You stop feeling like you need to explain every shift. You stop apologizing for responding differently in different situations. Because now you understand that you are not changing. You are calibrating. And this calibration is what prepares you for what comes next. Because the moment you fully accept that you are not one-dimensional is the moment you begin to step into the fullness of who you were always meant to be. Type "I embrace my full self" in the comments if this truth resonates within you. Blessing code 6767 is now activating deeper alignment within your spirit. There is a strategy that has been working quietly in your life for longer than you realize. It did not come in the form of obvious attack. It did not arrive loudly, aggressively, or in ways that were easy to identify. Instead, it came subtly through thoughts, through interpretations, through the way you began to see yourself. And Archangel Michael steps forward now with a revelation that may shift everything you thought you understood about your internal struggle. He says, "The greatest deception was not what others did to you, but what you began to believe about yourself because of it. Because the real strategy was never just to hurt you. It was to divide you, to create a separation between your light and your shadow and then convince you that one of them had to be wrong." Think about how this unfolded. Every time you reacted in a way that didn't match what others expected, you were questioned. Every time you pulled back to protect yourself, you were misunderstood. Every time you expressed something deeper, something more intense, something more aware, it was labeled as too much, too sensitive, or overthinking. And slowly, without realizing it, those labels began to settle into your mind, not as external opinions but as internal beliefs. You started to monitor yourself. You started to correct yourself. You started to silence parts of yourself before anyone else could question them. And this is where the strategy took hold. Because instead of trusting your inner responses, you began to doubt them. Instead of listening to your instincts, you began to override them. Instead of allowing your shadow to guide you when something felt off, you began to question whether you were the problem. Archangel Michael says, "You were taught to mistrust the very part of you that was designed to protect you." And that mistrust created confusion. Because now, when your shadow tried to speak, through discomfort, through hesitation, through awareness, you didn't immediately recognize it as guidance. You saw it as something to fix, something to control, something to quiet down. So you pushed past it. You stayed in situations longer than you should have. You gave chances where boundaries were needed. You ignored patterns because you wanted to believe in a version of reality that felt easier to hold on to. And every time you did that, the internal tension grew. Because your light was trying to stay open while your shadow was trying to keep you aware. And instead of working together, they began to feel like they were opposing each other. But they were never the problem. The problem was the belief that one of them had to be silenced. Because once you accepted that belief, you became divided within yourself. And when you are divided within yourself, it becomes easier for external situations to affect you more deeply. It becomes easier to be manipulated, easier to be misunderstood, easier to be pulled into environments that do not align with your spirit. Not because you are weak, but because you are no longer fully listening to yourself. Archangel Michael reveals something critical here. He says, a divided spirit questions itself. A unified spirit moves with clarity. And the entire strategy was designed to keep you in that state of questioning. To make you second-guess your instincts. To make you hesitate when your awareness is trying to guide you. To make you feel guilty for protecting your energy. Because if you are constantly questioning yourself, you are less likely to act with certainty. And certainty is what protects your path. Think about how many times you felt something immediately but then talked yourself out of it. You felt the shift. You noticed the inconsistency. You sensed the misalignment. But instead of trusting it, you rationalized it. You told yourself, maybe I'm overthinking. You said, maybe I just need to be more patient. You convinced yourself to stay aligned with what looked right even when it didn't feel right. And in those moments the strategy was working. Not because something external was overpowering you, but because something internal had been disconnected. But now that disconnection is being exposed. Because Archangel Michael is not just revealing what happened. He's restoring what was separated. He says, your light was never meant to exist without your shadow, and your shadow was never meant to be silenced by your light. They were always meant to function together. Your light gives you the ability to connect, to express, to move forward with openness. Your shadow gives you the ability to discern, to protect, to recognize what does not align. And when you allow both to speak, something powerful happens. You stop questioning every feeling. You stop overriding your awareness. You stop explaining away the signals your spirit is giving you. Because now you understand where they are coming from. And this is where the strategy begins to break. Because the moment you stop turning against yourself, you become aligned within yourself. And alignment changes everything. It changes how you respond. It changes how you perceive. It changes what you allow and what you walk away from. Because now you are no longer operating from confusion. You are operating from clarity. And what comes next is the moment where that clarity fully reveals itself. Type "I trust my inner voice" in the comments if you feel this truth awakening within you. Blessing code 7878 is now restoring unity within your spirit. There comes a moment in every journey where everything that once felt confusing begins to align. Not because the past changes, not because the experiences disappear, but because your perspective shifts. And that moment is where you are now. This is not just another point in time. This is not just another realization that will fade as life continues. This is a divine intersection, an appointed moment where what was hidden within you is now being brought into full awareness. And Archangel Michael speaks into this moment with unmistakable clarity. He says, heaven does not reveal truth randomly. It reveals truth when you are ready to carry it without rejecting yourself. Because if this truth had reached you earlier, you might not have understood it. You might have dismissed it. You might have resisted it. You might have continued seeing your shadow as something to control instead of something to comprehend. But now something within you has matured. You have lived enough. You have experienced enough. You have questioned yourself enough. And because of that, you are now able to see what was always there without immediately judging it. Think about how different this moment feels compared to where you were before. Before, when you felt that internal tension, you tried to silence it. Before, when your shadow surfaced, you tried to correct it. Before, when you noticed your shifts, you questioned your identity. But now you are listening. Now, you are observing instead of reacting. Now, you are allowing yourself to feel without immediately labeling those feelings as wrong. Now, you are beginning to recognize patterns instead of dismissing them. And this is why the truth is being revealed now. Because you are no longer trying to escape yourself. You are ready to understand yourself. Archangel Michael says, revelation comes when resistance ends, and something within you has stopped resisting. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough for the truth to enter without being blocked by old beliefs. And that truth is simple, yet profound. You were never meant to fix yourself. You were meant to recognize yourself. Everything you have experienced, every moment of confusion, every shift in your behavior, every internal contradiction, was not leading you toward becoming someone new. It was leading you toward seeing who you have always been. But seeing yourself clearly requires timing. Because clarity is not just about information. It is about readiness. If you are not ready, clarity feels overwhelming. If you are not ready, truth feels uncomfortable. If you are not ready, awareness feels like pressure instead of understanding. But now you are ready. And that is why this moment feels different. There is a stillness in it, a sense of recognition, a quiet knowing that something is finally making sense. You may not be able to explain it fully yet. You may not have all the words, but you feel it. That shift inside you where confusion begins to settle into understanding. That moment where you realize that what you thought was a problem was actually a process. That awareness is not something you created. It is something being revealed to you. Archangel Michael explains this further. He says, you are not discovering something new. You are remembering what was always within you. And that is why this moment carries so much weight. Because it is not just about understanding your past. It is about changing how you move forward. When you see yourself clearly, you stop trying to fit into expectations that were never meant for you. You stop forcing consistency where awareness is required. You stop apologizing for parts of yourself that were designed to protect you. And instead you begin to move with intention. You begin to trust what you feel. You begin to respond with clarity. You begin to recognize when something aligns and when it doesn't. And this changes everything. Because now your decisions are no longer based on confusion. They are based on understanding. And understanding is what allows you to move through life without constantly second-guessing yourself. This is why this moment matters. This is why it feels significant. This is why it feels like something is shifting not outside of you but within you. Because it is. And once this shift happens, it cannot be undone. You cannot go back to not seeing what you now see. You cannot return to questioning what you now understand. You cannot unlearn the awareness that has now been activated within you. This is the point of no return. Not in a way that limits you, but in a way that frees you. Because from this moment forward, you are no longer operating in the same level of awareness. You are stepping into something deeper, something clearer, something more aligned. And what comes next is not about discovering more. It is about integrating what you now understand. Type ISE clearly now in the comments if you feel this shift happening within you. Blessing code 8989 is now activating clarity in your spirit. As this truth settles into your spirit, understand that what is being revealed to you is not meant to stop with you. Every revelation you receive becomes a seed of light that can awaken someone else who is still walking in confusion. When you support this message through Super Thanks or through the PayPal link in the description, you are not giving to a platform. You are sowing into a divine flow that reaches hearts searching for clarity. The word declares that those who sow generously will also reap generously. And this is not just a principle. It is a living promise over your life. I feel led to say this clearly. I am stepping into alignment in this moment, and my seed will carry this light further than my presence ever could. Just as heaven chose this moment to reveal truth to you, your giving now becomes a timely act that unlocks revelation for others. Do not delay this response, because obedience in the moment carries power beyond what you can see. Release your seed now and watch how heaven multiplies clarity, provision, and purpose back into your life. There comes a point in your journey where awareness alone is no longer enough. You can see clearly now. You can recognize the patterns, the shifts, the internal dynamics that once confused you. But clarity, on its own, is only the beginning. What comes after clarity is integration. And this is where everything you have learned begins to take form within you. This is where the separation you once felt between your light and your shadow begins to dissolve. And Archangel Michael steps into this moment with a voice that carries both authority and reassurance. He says, "You are not here to choose between your sides. You are here to unite them. Because for too long, you have lived as if these parts of you were in opposition. You saw your light as the version of you that was acceptable, kind, open, and easy to understand. And you saw your shadow as the version of you that complicated things, that created distance, that introduced hesitation and intensity. And because of that perception, you tried to lean more into one while minimizing the other. But that effort is what created the imbalance. Because when you suppress your shadow, your light becomes unprotected. It begins to give too much, trust too quickly, and remain open in spaces that do not honor it. And when you suppress your light, your shadow becomes overactive. It begins to guard too strongly, question too deeply, and withdraw even when connection is safe. And that is when life starts to feel extreme, either too open or too closed, either too trusting or too guarded, either too expressive or too distant. But you were never meant to exist in extremes. You were meant to exist in balance. Archangel Michael says, your power is not in choosing one side. Your power is in allowing both to function in harmony. And harmony is not something you force. It is something you allow. It begins the moment you stop resisting parts of yourself. The moment you stop labeling your reactions as right or wrong, and instead begin to understand where they are coming from. Because every response you have is a source. When your light speaks, it is coming from a place of connection, openness, and expression. When your shadow speaks, it is coming from a place of awareness, protection, and discernment. And when you learn to listen to both without immediately judging either, something begins to shift within you. You no longer feel divided. You feel informed. Think about how this changes your experience. Instead of questioning why you feel hesitant, you begin to explore what your hesitation is showing you. Instead of forcing yourself to stay open, you begin to recognize when openness is truly aligned. Instead of reacting impulsively, you begin to respond with intention. And this is where reconciliation begins. Not through control, not through suppression, but through understanding. Archangel Michael reveals something deeply important here. He says, integration is the moment you realize that nothing within you is working against you. And that realization is transformative. Because when you no longer see yourself as divided, you stop trying to fix yourself. You stop trying to become something different. And instead you begin to trust the system that already exists within you. A system that has been guiding you all along, even when you didn't understand it, even when you questioned it, even when you resisted it. It was still there, your light continuing to express, your shadow continuing to observe, both working even when you thought they were in conflict. But now you see it differently. You see that your light is not meant to overpower your shadow, and your shadow is not meant to silence your light. They are meant to support each other. Your light allows you to move forward. Your shadow ensures that you move wisely. Your light allows you to connect. Your shadow ensures that you connect with the right people. Your light allows you to express. Your shadow ensures that your expression is aligned with truth. And when both are active, something powerful happens. You become grounded. You are no longer easily pulled in different directions by external influences. You are no longer swayed by every opinion, every expectation, every shifting environment. Because now your direction comes from within. And this is where true stability begins. Not the kind of stability that comes from staying the same, but the kind that comes from being aligned, no matter what changes around you. Archangel Michael says, when you are united within yourself, nothing outside of you can create confusion within you. And this is the shift you are stepping into. A shift where your decisions are not based on pressure but on clarity. A shift where your responses are not reactive but intentional. A shift where you are no longer trying to become someone else but are fully stepping into who you have always been. And this is what prepares you for what comes next. Because once you are united within yourself, your identity begins to activate in a way that cannot be ignored. Not just by you, but by everything around you. Type I am whole in the comments if you feel this integration happening within you. Blessing code 9090 is now anchoring balance within your spirit. There is a moment in every transformation where understanding turns into embodiment. A moment where what you have been realizing internally begins to shift the way you exist externally. And this is that moment for you. Because up until now, you have been observing, learning, and reconnecting with parts of yourself that were once misunderstood. But now, something deeper is happening. Something more powerful. You are no longer just becoming aware of who you are beginning to activate it. And Archangel Michael steps forward with a voice that carries unmistakable authority as he declares, what you have recognized within yourself is now ready to be lived, not just understood. Because identity is not just something you think about. It is something you move through. It is something that shapes your decisions, your responses, your presence, and your direction. And for a long time, your identity felt unstable, not because it was unclear, but because it was divided. You were trying to operate from a partial understanding of yourself, relying on one side while questioning the other. But now that division has begun to dissolve, and what replaces it is alignment. Alignment between what you feel and what you know. Alignment between how you perceive and how you respond. Alignment between your light and your shadow. And when that alignment begins to form, your identity becomes clear. Not in a way that limits you, but in a way that grounds you. Archangel Michael says, your true identity is not one expression. It is the harmony of all that you are. And this is where activation begins. Because once you stop questioning your internal system, you begin to trust it. You no longer hesitate every time you feel something deeply. You no longer dismiss your instincts when they arise. You no longer override your awareness just to maintain comfort. Instead, you listen. You observe. You respond. And that response begins to reflect your true identity. Think about how different this feels from before. Before, you needed external confirmation to feel certain. Before, you relied on others to validate your decisions. Before, you adjusted yourself to fit environments that didn't fully align with you. But now something shifts. Now, your clarity comes from within. Now, your decisions are guided by understanding. Now, your presence carries a different kind of certainty. Not loud, not forced, but steady. And this steadiness is what defines your true identity. Because identity is not about being fixed in one way. It is about being anchored in who you are, no matter how the situation changes around you. And that is exactly what is beginning to happen within you. Archangel Michael reveals something deeper here. He says, activation occurs when you stop performing and start existing in truth. And this is where many people hesitate, because existing in truth requires letting go of the need to be perceived a certain way. It requires releasing the habits of self-adjustment that were built on external expectations. It requires trusting that who you are, fully, completely, without reduction, is enough. And for a long time it felt uncertain, because you were used to filtering yourself. You were used to managing how much of yourself to show. You were used to adjusting your responses based on how others might interpret them. But now you are stepping out of that pattern, not by force, but by realization. Because once you understand that your identity is already complete, you no longer feel the need to modify it to be accepted. You begin to stand in it. And standing in it changes everything. It changes how you communicate. It changes how you engage with others. It changes how you move through situations that once felt uncertain. Because now you are not reacting from confusion. You are responding from clarity. And this clarity is what activates your presence. People begin to feel it. Not because you are trying to project something, but because you are no longer divided within yourself. Your words carry more intention. Your silence carries more meaning. Your decisions carry more certainty. And even you begin to notice it. That shift in how you respond. That ease in how you navigate situations. That confidence in what you feel, without needing to justify it. This is not something you are trying to become. This is something you are remembering. Archangel Michael says, you are not stepping into something new. You are returning to what was always true. And that truth is your identity. Not the version shaped by expectations. Not the version influenced by misunderstanding. But the version that has always existed beneath all of that. The version that carries both light and shadow in balance. The version that moves with awareness and expression at the same time. The version that does not need to choose between being open or being protected, because it knows when to be both. And this is what prepares you for what comes next. Because once your identity is activated, it begins to influence everything around you. Not through force, but through presence. And that presence will not go unnoticed. Type "I walk in my true identity" in the comments if you feel this activation happening within you. Blessing code 1010 is now anchoring your identity in truth. Here is a moment that follows true alignment, a moment that many do not anticipate, yet it changes everything about how you are experienced by the world around you. It is not something you announce. It is not something you try to prove. It is not something you force into existence. It simply happens as a result of who you have become within yourself. And you are stepping into that moment now. Because once your identity begins to activate, once your light and your shadow begin to function in harmony, once you stop questioning yourself and start moving with clarity, the way others perceive you begins to shift. And Archangel Michael speaks into this transition with a tone that is both steady and undeniable. He says, when you become clear within yourself, others can no longer define you by fragments. And this is where things begin to feel different. Not just internally, but externally. Because for a long time, people interacted with versions of you that were still forming. Versions of you that were adjusting, adapting, and sometimes filtering themselves to fit expectations. And because of that, their perception of you was incomplete. It was based on moments, on reactions, on isolated experiences that did not reflect the full depth of who you are. Some saw your openness and assumed you were always accessible. Some saw your silence and assumed you were distant. Some saw your boundaries and assumed you had changed. Some saw your awareness and felt uncomfortable without understanding why. But now something shifts, because you are no longer presenting fragments. You are standing in wholeness, and wholeness cannot be easily interpreted or reduced. Archangel Michael says, when you are aligned, your presence speaks before your words do, and that presence carries a different energy. It is not reactive. It is not seeking validation. It is not trying to be understood. It simply is. And because of that, people begin to respond to you differently. Some will feel drawn to your clarity. Some will feel challenged by your awareness. Some will feel uncertain around your steadiness. Not because you are doing anything differently on the surface, but because your internal alignment is now visible in the way you carry yourself. Think about how this begins to unfold. In conversations, you no longer feel the need to over-explain yourself. You speak when it is aligned, and you remain silent when it is not. And that silence no longer feels like something you need to justify. It feels natural. In relationships, you no longer ignore what you feel just to maintain connection. You recognize when something aligns and when it doesn't. And because of that, your interactions become more intentional. In situations that once caused hesitation, you now move with a quiet certainty. Not because you have all the answers, but because you trust your internal guidance. And this changes how others experience you. Because before, there was space for misinterpretation. There was room for people to define you based on limited understanding. There was opportunity for others to project their expectations onto you because you were still adjusting yourself in response to them. But now that space is closing, not in a way that isolates you, but in a way that protects your identity, Archangel Michael reveals something important here. He says, when you stop adjusting your truth, others must adjust their perception. And this is where the shift becomes noticeable. Some people will begin to see you more clearly than they ever have before. They will recognize the depth, the awareness, the balance that you carry. They will feel the steadiness in your presence and understand that it comes from alignment, not from performance. But others may not understand it at all, because they were accustomed to interacting with a version of you that was more flexible, more accommodating, more willing to adjust. And now, that version is no longer leading. So they may question you. They may say you have changed. They may feel distance where there is simply clarity. They may interpret your boundaries as something personal when in reality, they are simply a line. But Archangel Michael says, you are not responsible for maintaining the comfort of those who benefited from your confusion. And that truth is essential for you to understand. Because this shift is not about changing how others see you. It is about no longer changing yourself to control how they see you. And the difference is what creates freedom. You are no longer trying to be understood by everyone. You are simply being who you are. And those who are aligned with that will recognize it. They will feel the consistency in your presence, even as your responses adapt to different situations. They will understand that your balance is not contradiction but awareness. And those who are not aligned will reveal themselves through their reactions, not because you are pushing them away, but because your clarity no longer allows for misalignment to remain unnoticed. And this is where your external world begins to reflect your internal alignment. Because as you become more grounded in who you are, everything around you begins to adjust accordingly. Your interactions become more meaningful. Your environment begins to reflect the level of awareness you now carry. And this is not something you need to force. It is something that happens naturally as a result of your alignment. Archangel Michael says, when you stand fully in who you are, your life reorganizes around that truth. And that is exactly what is beginning to happen. Because you are no longer divided. You are no longer uncertain. You are no longer adjusting yourself to fit spaces that do not align. You are standing. And that standing changes everything. Because what comes next is not just about how you are seen. It is about what is now being released over your life as a result of your alignment. Type "I stand in my truth" in the comments if you feel this shift happening within you. Blessing code 1111 is now strengthening your presence and clarity. There is a final truth that must be spoken, not to create fear, but to anchor what has already been revealed. Because everything you have come to understand in this moment, every realization, every shift in perception, every layer of clarity, carries responsibility. Not pressure, but awareness. And Archangel Michael steps forward now with a presence that feels both protective and commanding as he says, what has been revealed to you cannot be ignored without consequence to your alignment. Because now you see the difference between your light and your shadow, not as opposing forces, but as a unified system. You understand that what you once rejected was actually protecting you. You recognize that your pain had purpose, your tension had meaning, and your internal shifts were guiding you toward balance. But awareness alone is not enough. Because what you do next determines everything. Archangel Michael speaks clearly. You cannot return to the version of yourself that did not understand what you now know. And this is where the warning becomes real. Not in a way that threatens you, but in a way that calls you forward. Because now that you recognize your inner balance, you can no longer ignore your instincts without feeling the disconnection. You can no longer override your awareness without sensing the misalignment. You can no longer stay in environments that do not honor your truth without your spirit responding. And that response will be stronger than before. Because once clarity is activated, it does not become silent again. Think about what this means for your life, moving forward. It means that every decision you make will now come with deeper awareness. It means that every interaction you have will be filtered through a clearer understanding of alignment. It means that the internal voice you once questioned will now speak with greater certainty. And you will feel it. You will feel the difference between what aligns and what does not. You will feel when something is meant for you and when it is not. You will feel when to move forward and when to step back. And this feeling is not something to second guess anymore. It is something to trust. Archangel Michael says, your responsibility is not to be perfect. Your responsibility is to remain aligned. And alignment is not about always getting everything right. It is about staying connected to what you now understand. It is about honoring both your light and your shadow in every situation. It is about allowing your awareness to guide you even when it requires change. Because there will be moments where this alignment asks something of you. Moments where you will need to set boundaries that you once avoided. Moments where you will need to walk away from situations that no longer fit. Moments where you will need to trust yourself even when it feels unfamiliar. And in those moments the old patterns may try to return. The urge to explain yourself. The urge to adjust for others. The urge to ignore what you feel in order to maintain comfort. But now you will recognize those patterns. And that recognition is what gives you the ability to choose differently. Because you are no longer unaware. You are no longer divided. You are no longer operating from confusion. You are moving from clarity. And that clarity is your protection. Archangel Michael offers a final declaration here. He says, what you have integrated within yourself has created a level of awareness that cannot be undone. Walk in it, and you will remain protected. Ignore it, and you will feel the separation immediately. And this is not punishment. It is alignment. because your spirit now knows what it did not know before. And once something is known, it becomes part of how you move forward. But with this awareness also comes blessing, because alignment does not just protect you, it positions you, and positions you for connections that truly reflect who you are. It positions you for opportunities that align with your awareness. It positions you for a life that no longer feels forced but flows naturally from your truth. And this is the gift of everything you have just experienced. Not just understanding, but transformation. You are no longer the person who questioned your own nature. You are no longer the person who tried to separate parts of yourself. You are now someone who sees clearly, who moves intentionally, who stands in alignment. And this is where your next chapter begins. Not from confusion, not from division, but from wholeness. Archangel Michael leaves you with this final message. You were never broken. You were becoming. And now you are ready. Hold on to that, because everything from this moment forward will reflect it. Type "I am aligned and ready" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 1212 is now sealing this transformation over your life. As this final truth settles into your spirit, understand this: what has been revealed to you carries the power to awaken countless others who are still searching for clarity. When you release your support through Super Thanks or through the PayPal link in the description, you are not giving to a message. You are fueling a divine movement that reaches souls in their darkest moments. The word speaks, "Give, and it shall be given unto you, pressed down, shaken together, and running over." And this is not just scripture. It is a living exchange activated by your obedience. I feel this deeply. I am responding to this moment, and my seed will carry light where my voice cannot reach. Just as your hidden side protected your light, your giving now becomes a covering for someone else's breakthrough. This is not a casual action. It is a prophetic response that opens spiritual doors over your life. Do not delay what heaven is prompting you to do. So now, act now, and watch how God multiplies your obedience into blessings, clarity, and divine acceleration.